Welcome to Believe in Better with Brian.
And optimistic.
Because we think and we know it can be better. And we'll show you how in some cases. In some cases, we'll say we don't know how.
And at times comedic.
But I'll be talking to you about some morons. What? Hold on. What? You don't want me to use language like that?
Analysis of the week's news from a former mayor.
Welcome to Believe in Better with Brian. And here we are on GCD Network, gcdnetwork.com. And I am your host, Brian. That's the name, Believe in Better with Brian. Thanks, as always, to my producers, Giancarlo and Sam and Paulie. So thanks for helping us out, putting it all together. And here, Believe in Better, we think things can be better. Thus, we're going to tell you what we think and give you the straight opinion on things and the straight facts. If it's said here, you can trust it. Okay, so what's going to happen today? In a moment, we're going to have our mug of the meeting and its implications. Our mug, Disney related and on political correctness. So what else are we going to do? Oh, let's talk about tariffs and things like that. So what are tariffs? What do they affect? I'll tell you about it. And I know I'm a CPA by profession, got my degree in economics, my MBA, did a lot of reading on it. I will tell you about tariffs and how they work. Are they good? Are they bad? And then we will have, make my notes, politics as usual, and what's been in the headlines and our take on it, how that affects things. And who did what and should they have? Let's see. A little bit on law and order and miscarriage of justice. When is a murder not a murder? When the weak judge lets you off. We'll talk about that a little bit. And then under things your dad should have taught you. A little bit of love thy neighbor and touchy-feely and what's right and what's ridiculous. But we'll talk about that too. So first, let's start with our mug of the meeting. Whoa, almost spilled on my keyboard. This is, the point is it's Disney. It's from the Disney movie Beauty and the Beast, but we're not going to talk about Beauty and the Beast today. This is Chip, the cup that was there. Good water. Disney water is good, I guess. So Disney, you have to give them. They run a good company. But the newest Disney point is their movie, Snow White. They earned a lot of their successful animations from the decades into live action movies. Thus our controversy. How could it be controversy if you turn a cartoon into a movie? I will tell you. I'm glad you asked that. Okay, so ironically, this Disney Snow White live action is chock full of animation and thus more of the controversy. Why is animation controversial in a Disney movie? I will tell you. Because Disney was criticized. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was the original 1937 movie. Okay, they made Snow White use in the original 1937 because her skin was as white as snow. Now it's someone Latino. No problem with that. That's good. You have whoever you want to play these parts. That's not an issue at all. I think now they say she was born. The line is born in a snowstorm. Thus the word white, Snow White. But okay, anyway. It was called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, 1937. That's the controversy. And this is the first salvo against them, I think, was shot by Peter Dinklage. He's a dwarf, an actor, and he said, hey, what kind of thing is this? Okay, so they're making her be politically correct, where Snow White is changed. But you've got 7 dwarfs, 7 little people, and they're living in a cave. What kind of cracking against stereotypes, making bad stereotypes is that? First of all, they don't live in a cave. They live in this beautiful cottage in the woods. And they work well. So, this was a criticism against Disney why you have 7 dwarfs like that. So here's their solution. Well, no, they didn't make them big people. What they did is they made the dwarfs CGI. That is animation. So let me get this straight. You, Disney, you broke down under someone's criticism that dwarfs weren't good in the movie. So you had cartoon dwarfs instead. I'm not getting this. Wait a minute. I don't get it. So real dwarfs, or as they sometimes call little people, were not good enough. So you made cartoons. So this led to a new backlash, which this one I agree with. Okay, so there's a bunch of course, actors who are dwarfs who said, hey, wait a minute. It's hard to come by acting roles as dwarfs in Hollywood. Hollywood who pretends to be so PG. But that's the wrong letters. PC, that's it, politically correct. They were criticized a few years ago for not having enough Black people of color actors getting nominations. And they were the one criticizing the rest of the world, but that's beside the point of this one. So you could have had 7 actors with good roles here. They could have had jobs, like I said, rare in Hollywood. So instead of hiring these people, they made cartoons of them. I'm not getting why that is. Huh? So instead of live actors, they could have given them jobs. They would have portrayed them in a good light, would have been real people, but now they made them animation. Huh? Give me a break. Political correctness run amok. And I'm not even sure why this is political correctness. So the new Disney live action movie is chock full of animation in the real life version. I can see them animating the animals there. Okay. Talks to the animals. Commutes with the animals. So, but for human beings, I don't know. So Disney kept a bunch of actors with dwarfism off the set. They could have had jobs. Instead, they wanted cartoons. Even the title changed. It was Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs in 1937 cartoon. That's Snow White and the 7 magical creatures. So let me get this straight again. Political correctness. Instead of calling them dwarfs, we call them creatures instead. I can't bear to look at anymore. Ugh. So they're not dwarfs, they're creatures, and that's supposed to be better. They're not real people, actors with jobs in good roles, and they could have had a good portrayal. But there's a problem, so they made them cartoons instead. Our pursuit of political correctness just makes it political badness. Okay, so our mug of the week to Disney. But they do run a hell of an amusement park, and they did have a nice run of movies over the years. Back in that. Okay, so let's get politics and economics, tariffs. So what actually is a tariff? A tariff is a tax. Yes, a tax. People who impose tariffs. Lately, it's been a Republican love fest, although Republicans used to be against it. When Donald Trump was for it, they changed their minds. Okay, a tariff is a tax. We're against taxes. Well, no, you're not, because you're imposing a tariff. But there's a good reason for it. Other countries are going to pay the tax. No, they're not. Because here's what it is. It's a tax placed on goods and services when they cross national borders. It's been in the United States since the country was founded. There's a few types of tariffs The most common type, which we're going to talk about, is the import tariff. So when goods and services are brought into the country, you impose a tariff, a payment on the company importing them. So you're putting a tax on U.S. companies that are importing. You put a tariff on China or Canada. No, those countries are not paying. They'll suffer the consequences a little bit. We'll get into that. So in the past, it's been used for income. In 1900, tariffs accounted for about 41% of the U.S. government income. That's 4 out of $10. A little over a century later, in 2013, it dropped to 2%. So from 40 to 2%. So it makes up a very small percentage of the American income now. 1900, that's before there was an income tax and all that. That might have been before there was spending run amok also, where the government spent like a drunken sailor, which they do now. So, but there are developing countries like Ethiopia, they rely on tariffs for a significant portion of their revenue. It makes things costlier to their people. It's an economic decision. So who has the power to impose a tariff? Well, President Trump. He's also President-elect Trump. He set them, and he will set them. And he's threatening to set some. But you know what? It's actually Congress who has the power to set tariffs. So why is President Trump able to do this? Because Congress gave the power to the executive branch. But in particular, the president can impose a tariff if it involves national security or an economic emergency. Now, he might say this is an economic emergency, but frankly, it's really not. I don't think that would hold. Could say it's national security that we get these goods, but it's really not. National security is like World War II and imports. An economic emergency, that would probably be more like the Great Depression. Maybe a recession, you can get away with it. But basically, Congress abdicated it to the president. In fairness, to put it on Congress to impose for every country and every tariff and every type, that might be kind of cumbersome. So delegating it to the president may not be such a bad idea. If Congress wanted, they could take it back from the president. So if it's a Congress of a different party, we may actually see that. Who knows? So going back, in the United States, the importer or the company bringing the goods into the country pays the actual tariffs to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and they're part of the Treasury Department. As I said, not the country it's coming from. The result, it makes the goods more costly. If I am importing goods and I have to pay so many extra dollars, I'm going to pass that on to the consumer. So why do we do that? In theory, it would make imports less. It would make them cost more, which is costly more to the American people. But it could leave room for Americans to provide those goods and services instead. Said tariffs used to be anti-Republican, and now the Republicans embrace it. Here's another part to consider. When a country imposes a tariff, it will almost definitely get a retaliatory tariff from that country. Meaning, when the U.S. imposed tariffs on China, they said, okay, fine, I'm putting tariffs on your fruits and vegetables and agricultural products. So now it's not just the tariffs, it's the cost, it compounds it. And anyone who's imposing tariffs really has to think it through. But frankly, they don't. They just say, I'm putting on the tariff. So the U.S. government, to the tune of billions and billions of dollars, had to subsidize agricultural industry for what they lost because they couldn't be exported to other countries. So from all nations, and this is in the United States, it was China, it was European Union, it was all of those. It cost the U.S. around $121 billion, $121 billion extra because of the tariffs. It should be things we have to think through. Okay, now to politics. Here's a quote from history. I say that with all respect. With all due respect, the son of a bitch, pardon the son of a bitch. Can't take credit for that one. Bob Woodward, along with Carl Bernstein, who wrote All the President's Men, and basically broke and like a bulldog on someone's ankle, held on to that Watergate story and persisted and broke the story. They were doing it. Richard Nixon resigned in August of 1974, and Bob Woodward said he was sleeping late one afternoon, and the phone rings. And back then, there was no caller ID. You don't know who it would be, but it was Carl Bernstein, and we would probably pick it up for his partner at the Washington Post. And he said, Bob Woodward picked up the phone, hello, and Carl Bernstein said, the son of a bitch, pardon the son of a bitch, meaning President Ford, who was newly in office about a month, had pardoned Richard Nixon for all the crimes he committed or might have committed. And Bob Woodward said he originally thought it was a deal between Gerald Ford and Richard Nixon, that Nixon would resign and Ford would pardon him. And actually, Ford was offered that deal, and he did not go along with it, to his credit. And it was nearly 20 years later, when Bob Woodward was interviewing Gerald Ford, that he said he came to the conclusion, because he gave him the scoop on it. And Gerald Ford was basically sincere that no, there was no deal. Gerald Ford turned it down, but he said all his press conferences, everything kept asking about Watergate. So much of his time, there was inflation, there was things he was trying to do, there was foreign and domestic issues, and it was so much taken up with Watergate. And half the questions to him were about Watergate. He said, we've got to put this behind us and go on. So he issued a pardon, and even people, partisan Democrats like Ted Kennedy at the time, Senator Ted Kennedy of Massachusetts, he was angry and against it. And years later, he said, you know what? It was the right thing to do. A lot of people came to that conclusion. It let everything be behind the country, and they could go on from there. So I personally think Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein are great people, and Gerald Ford was one of the most decent people to ever be in the White House. So now about pardons. We're talking about how President Joe Biden pardoned his son from gun offenses and tax offenses and, quote, offenses against the U.S. which he committed or may have committed from January 1st, 2024 to December 1st, 2024. Sorry, January 1st, 2014 to December 1st, 2024. When he issued the pardon, you can't pardon someone for future offenses. So that was the past. So President Biden said, these charges were politically tainted, so I gave him a pardon. But wait a minute. Politically tainted? It was the Ford administration Justice Department and his attorney general, under their auspices, this was taken. So wait a minute, let me get this straight. I got to put on my shades because I can't get this. So President Biden said these procedures were tainted, they were politically motivated, but it was his attorney general and his Justice Department which did the prosecution and helped convince the jury to find him guilty. Give me a break. Some people say President Biden lied. He said he won't give him a pardon, and he did. Maybe he didn't technically lie. Maybe he changed his mind. But weaponizing the Justice Department, which he railed against, he basically did the opposite. He used his power to unweaponize them and to give a pardon to his son. So federal pardons are only applied to federal offenses. President Trump cannot pardon himself for some of the things for which he has been found guilty because they were state offenses. You can only do it for federal government. It's the governor who can generally do it in states. Also, a president cannot give a pardon for an impeachment. So in a pardon, it's basically, as the Supreme Court said, quote, an imputation of guilt and acceptance of a confession to it. So basically, by Hunter Biden accepting this pardon, he's admitting guilt. There's a little bit of controversy, but that's basically it. So on December 1st of 2024, lame duck period, President Joe Biden issued a full and unconditional pardon to his son, Hunter Biden, who'd been convicted of some federal gun and tax evasion charges. Tax evasion, does he have to pay it back? No, he does not. Wipe out clean. Now, I'm a CPA. If someone has the means and at least make him pay what he owed in taxes, but that's wiped out too. That's more unconscionable to me. And the pardon also included any potential crimes he did or may have committed. And like I said, his son was selectively and unfairly prosecuted by his own Justice Department. Give me a break. President Trump was not immune from this. He pardoned his former national security advisor, retired General Michael Flynn, who pleaded one count guilty of making false statements to the FBI, which prompted actually President Trump to fire him after less than a month in office. And it was about 4 years ago, President Trump pardoned 26 friends and allies that included Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, and Charles Kushner, his son-in-law's father. So both sides, I think, have egg on their face. And you know what? They don't care. They don't care. Because shamelessly, they'll do things like that just to get above it. Where is it? So did President Biden lie? I don't know, but it's going to put a shadow on his presidency. But in all fairness, did he lie? Maybe not. Because President Biden, he may not remember his son was on trial. He may not remember he even has children, poor guy. So that gives him the benefit of the doubt, right? So it shows. If you play cards, if you watch TV with a powerful politician, people in power, you too can be above the law. You want to be above the law? Then suck the lollipop from a professional politician. And you poor schnooks out there, you are shit out of luck. Once more, the elite get it, get the breaks. The poor schnook who's in for owning 2 ounces of marijuana a few years ago may still be behind bars. We got a long way to go before justice really gets served around here. So let's talk about a miscarriage of justice. Here's our Law and Order Department. Megan Emirowitz, I'll pronounce right. She's now 20 years old. A year ago, she was released from prison after having spent less than a year and a half in custody. Because she was in prison for 17 months awaiting her trial. What was her crime? That she was released after 17 months. She killed her father. She didn't maim him. She didn't smoke a joint with him. She didn't have a tax or gun charge, which was pardoned, or any of other things like that. She killed her father by burning him with a dangerous powder when he did not drive her to a hair appointment before her 18th birthday. This is not some trumped up thing. She did it. It was proven. Wouldn't take her to a hair appointment. Found guilty, the judge let her off. The Michigan Court of Appeals, again, a bunch of morons, said the trial court provided ample justification for the sentence imposed, which means a little minimal sentence imposed. And they voted 3-0. Who the hell's on this Court of Appeals that they would agree with a stupid trial judge? Give me a break. sentence guideline called for a minimum term of slightly more than 4 years in prison for her. But it wasn't 4 years. It was like 17 months. Oakland County Judge Victoria Valentine, why should she even be a judge, gave this person, Megan Emirowitz, a break, noting her age, her lack of maturity, and her likelihood of rehabilitation. Lack of maturity for burning her father. So what she did is she threw lye on him when he was sleeping. It's a chemical drain cleaner. So throw Drano and liquid plumber on someone. He was sleeping, causing severe burns all over his body. He needed dialysis, a tracheotomy, both legs amputated before dying 5 months later. They acknowledge the death was caused by these chemical burns. Look, I am all for rehabilitation and second chances, but give me a break! Oh my goodness! What the hell is going on in places like this? I don't know. I certainly don't know. So let's go to something a little more touching, though stupid. And this is things your father should have taught you. Taught you love thy neighbor, which people didn't learn in New Zealand. New Zealand, Brian, why are you talking about New Zealand? I will tell you why. I'm glad you asked. Okay. Not too much love thy neighbor in New Zealand. New Zealand Airport has a new policy, and they have it posted in a sign. Here it is. Get this. There's a 3-minute cap on hugs at the airport. So, and on the sign, it even says, if you want a longer hug, quote, for fonder farewells, use the parking lot. I guess it's because in New Zealand, you can't have a hug at the airport more than 3 minutes. They literally say to use the parking lot. And I guess if you're hit by a car in the parking lot, the EMT will hug you on the way to the hospital. So let me get this straight. In New Zealand, there is a moratorium. They say you can't hug more than 3 minutes at the airport. So I just want to see videos of the hug police or the affection SWAT team coming and dragging off a couple because they hugged for 3 minutes and 4 seconds. We'll see how that goes. So always remember, the philosophy is integrity. The feeling is empathy. So I want to ask an expert in affection, Lisa Bhakti Overcash.